This week, Aubrey Turner from Ping Identity is with us to discuss going passwordless. Then security researcher Sick Codes joins us to talk about hacking tractor telematics. Finally, in the enterprise security news, HiveWatch raises $20 million to protect the office. Fort Robotics raises $13 million to protect the office from robots. And Proof raises 2 million euros to secure embedded devices. Dutch startup One Welcome acquired by Thales. Dutch startup Hatching acquired by Recorded Future. Pwned No More aims to protect Web3. Cybersecurity vendors make us less secure. And perverse incentives in whistleblowing. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Picture your team being able to map out the external attack surface as it grows and see the same attack vectors as a hacker does. Most tools out there do asset discovery, but stop there. Enter Detectify. It takes an inventory of exposed web assets and automates vulnerability testing for security misconfigurations, expiring subdomains, and risks in third-party software. Here's the cool part. They crowdsource payloads from leading ethical hackers. It finds bugs you actually want to fix and finds them in time. Start a free 2-week trial by visiting securityweekly.com/Detectify. Go hack yourself. Imagine this scenario. You're out of the office unexpectedly, and a colleague pings you because they need access to some system you have credentials for. Now, my listeners would never send passwords over email or Slack. But what about your coworkers? How many organizations out there are sending logins back and forth in plain text? Worse yet, how many just store all of their logins on a shared spreadsheet? Keeper Security's password management platform locks down logins, payment cards, and more in a patented zero-knowledge encrypted vault. Sign up for a Keeper free trial today. Visit securityweekly.com/Keeper.
Deepwatch helps secure the digital economy by protecting and defending enterprise networks everywhere, every day. Deepwatch leverages its highly automated cloud-based SOC platform backed by a world-class team of experts who monitor, detect, and respond to threats on customers' digital assets 24/7, 365. Many of the world's leading brands rely on Deepwatch's managed detection and response. Visit securityweekly.com/Deepwatch to learn more. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy Junk Food Day, otherwise known as just a Thursday here in the U.S. This is episode 281, recorded on Thursday, July 21st, 2022. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me today is the Czar of Zero Trust, the captain of content, Katie Teitler. How are you, Katie?
I'm well. What is your favorite junk food, Adrian?
Oh, I'm not a huge junk food person, but it would have to be Reese's peanut butter cups. I really like chocolate peanut butter. Perfect.
Well, I guess that begs the question, what constitutes junk food? Is junk food anything that's unhealthy, or is it, does it have to be like more of a chips and pizza kind of thing, or can it include dessert?
Yeah, I think it's a very personal definition, right? Like, one person might have a more strict idea of what junk food is than another, I would think. What's yours?
An ambiguous term for junk food. I guess if we're going with a very free definition, I would have to say ice cream for the sweet. For savory, I would probably have to go with Chinese food. The Americanized kind.
Right. Yeah, the sweet fried orange chicken, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, not really nice steamed chicken and vegetables or something, which is also good, but fried rice and egg rolls.
Okay. All right. Also joining me is the herald of hacking, the captain of crypto, Mr. Tyler Robinson. How are you, Tyler?
I'm fantastic. I'm much better now. Your camera's not making me think I'm like going into a junk food coma with the blurriness. I don't know.
Did you have some junk food? What are your junk food preferences?
Ha! I don't eat a lot of junk food. Deep fried butter covered in Oreos with some sprinkling of. I actually don't know. I'll have some vanilla ice cream once in a while.
Okay, that works. See, like I said, very personal definition. Like some people don't eat a ton of junk food, but it is all around us all the time. All right, quick announcement here. I don't think we have any webcasts going on right now, but we do have some great ones that we have done in the past. So don't forget to check out our library of on-demand webcasts and technical trainings at securityweekly.com/on-demand. And our first interview here is sponsored by Ping Identity. And today's topic is going passwordless with risk signals. We're excited to have Aubrey Turner, Executive Advisor from Ping Identity, with us today. Welcome, Aubrey.
Thank you, Adrian. Great to be here. Salt and vinegar potato chips. Let's just get that out of the way.
What brand?
The Cape Cod.
Yes.
Is one. Yeah, those are the kettle cooked ones. Those are great. And I don't mean to plug another brand, but they go great with Jersey Mike's sub. So just just saying.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's gonna be our highest rated show just from all the junk food.
all the correct answers there.
Yeah.
And if you're watching today's episode, I did not have. Yeah, it's not you. It's my camera. I was going to swap this out and just didn't have a chance today because I have to disassemble my teleprompter. This is actually inside my teleprompter. And my theory is that this camera is trying to focus on the glass that it's behind because it's such a high quality webcam. It can actually see the glass and tries to focus on it. So that's my best guess as to why this thing keeps messing up on autofocus. Anyway, if you're listening, you don't have to worry about that. Or if you're watching and it really bothers you, maybe switch over to your favorite podcast app and listen to the audio version instead until I have time to swap out this camera. But big Cape Cod potato chip fan. That was the correct answer there. So jumping into, I can't think of a smooth segue into passwordless from junk food or potato chips, but I don't know. Maybe there's one there. Maybe are passwords the junk food of the authentication world, the security world, or do we need to kick the habit, Aubrey?
Yeah, that is a fantastic segue, Adrian. They kind of are a little bit. We do need to kick the habit. We're kind of addicted to passwords, right? They're inexpensive to implement, right? And they're everywhere. They're prolific. I think the average person probably has around 200. So I know we just saw an ad for Keeper, and I'm a customer, and I'm sure several of our listeners are. And if you go into Keeper and total up the number of user ID and passwords that you have, the average person has around 100, and I think it's 190, so close to 200. So they kind of are a bit like junk food, right? And the junk food analogy, we can continue that, right? So tastes really good. It's satisfying, but then we know that there's these negative effects, right? And with passwords, it's that they're easily stolen, easily forgotten, et cetera, et cetera. We reuse them. They just don't scale. They're not built for, they were suitable for a period of time, but in the world that we live in today, especially with the changes that the pandemic has brought about, and even before that, they just don't scale really, really well. So like junk food tastes really good, and however, it's bad for you. The one other thing that I'd like to add too, in terms of this password junk food analogy, is that everybody's definition of passwordless, and I think it was Katie or somebody who said this, your definition may be personal. So I think it's going to be important for you to understand, for us to define what passwordless actually means, because it can mean different things to different people. And for us to have be on the same page, it'd probably be important for us to understand what it really is and define that.
And I think you start to continue the analogy here. It's convenient, right? Like that's one of the pitfalls of junk food is it's really easy to just pick up a bag of chips, open it, and pretend that the whole thing, regardless of the size of the bag, is a single serving. And it's like when somebody's building a new app, like they don't think about whether or not to put password-based authentication in there. They just do it. And maybe they create a tier that's more expensive if you want to do SSO, or if you want to do MFA or something like that, you got to pay more to access that tier. And all of a sudden, like other types and other forms of authentication are like additional features when they should really just be kind of the easiest, most convenient thing that you reach for. I think that's often the solution with kicking junk food is making healthier snacks more convenient.
Yeah, make better choices, Adrian, I think is what our nutritionists and parents would tell you, right? Make a better choice. And passwords, they're cheap and easy to implement, just like junk food, right? It's like you said, it's fast, it's easy, they're convenient. In some cases we misunderstand the other options. There is a list, by the way, of, and I forget who created it. It's like the SSO shame list, like vendors, SaaS apps who charge for single sign-on. I don't know who created it. It's brilliant, but this is the second time in as many days that it's actually come up. So, in addition to, a host of other reasons, right, that we've kind of just talked through, why not offer a better option? And sometimes it's just, we are afraid to, the book, Who Moved My Cheese? Right? I may be messing up the title there, but that's the idea, right? We're afraid of impacting the user, and a user that's really, really comfortable with something, right? And that's the thing, right? We're creatures of habit. Dare I say lazy. 70% of us reuse passwords across apps and websites. So there's a whole host of reasons why, the journey to passwordless, it's taking us some time. It's been 18 years, by the way, since Bill Gates. It was April of 2004 when Bill Gates announced that we were going to move away from passwords, or we're going to kill the password. And so nearly 2 decades later, we're still doing that definition of insanity, right? Repeating the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, despite knowing the costs, right? We know the cost of password breach. We know 80% of them are due to sort of, attacks on credentials. So we know some of the costs, yet we, again, for those reasons that we've already kind of talked through, we continue to kind of do things the same way. So it literally, I'll sum that up by saying it's past due time for a change, and we just got to figure out how to get there.
So do you think a lot of that is just removing the Band-Aid for consumers? Because we do have a solution, we do have easy integration, but we do have this kind of nature of habit, and it makes people uncomfortable to do something that is actually easier than remembering all the passwords. This passwordless thing is phenomenal. You look at the FIDO2 Alliance and all the things that are now integrated between Apple, Google, recent release, all of the Azure, Microsoft has all their password and their Windows Hello for Business. So is it literally the fact that we've not ripped that Band-Aid off, or is it because the adoption process for the average user is hard to get in mainstream marketing?
It's a combination of all of those things. So there are commonly three sort of reasons why we've been held up and why adoption on passwordless has been slow, right? In that 18 years, right? So one, the passwordless as a capability, a feature functionality had to catch up to the hype of kill the password. So that's one thing. And that's kind of what you just alluded to. Love seeing the agreement between Microsoft, kind of the big three, Microsoft, Apple, and Google to lean into FIDO and lean into standards, which is going to make the adoption process easier. But there's still a whole lot of technical debt out there. There's a whole lot of technical compliant situations where it may not be easy to just sort of rip the Band-Aid off and kind of move to sort of true passwordless, right? There's some steps along the way, and I can talk through what those could look like, and hence the title of this conversation, leveraging risk signals as part of passwordless. And that's one way that you can get there if you're not able to quite rip the Band-Aid off. The other thing we touched on too is this, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? So and particularly with consumers, businesses are hesitant to make that change, and because they don't want to cause a customer to abandon them because they either don't understand what's happening, or they think passwordless actually means less security. We've been conditioned to think, when we think of a password, that's the thing between us and, again, our bank accounts, our health records, et cetera, et cetera. So there's an element of human change there that needs to happen in order for us to drive that adoption, even though those we're technically able to, quote unquote, rip the Band-Aid off. So that's the other thing, right? So getting people ready for that. And by the way, offering them options, because passwordless, I think roughly, is it 8 out of 10 Americans have a smartphone? I may be off on that. But what about the 2 of the 10 that don't? And how do we bring them into passwordless? So the other things is got to be able to offer optionality. So the technical debt, the technical compliance piece, the human element. And then the third thing is really those various user scenarios that every organization has, and the optionality that you probably need to have. So one of the things that I, when I'm talking to customers, I say the benchmark or telltale sign is, can an 8-year-old do it? And can your 80-year-old grandmother do it? If you can find a solution across your various user scenarios and your various use cases that fits those parameters, chances are you found something that works. But it's not always it's not always very easy. So again, optionality is a key element in terms of getting that adoption and being able to cross that cross that digital divide or the sort of technical limitations that you may have. So those are the things that I often encounter that are sort of holding us back from really, really accelerating passwordless. But I do think actually in the last couple of months, we've seen a tremendous amount of movement and a tremendous amount of positive progress in that direction.
Yeah. So when you say risk signals, let's dive into this, because I think, and just to tee it up, I think a lot of people think of passwords and authentication as something that you do once. You're logged in, and then you stay logged in for a certain amount of time. And, with some consumer apps, it's almost forever, it feels like, right? Like, the last time you logged into Twitter was probably the last time you bought a phone or a laptop or something like that. So talk a little bit about what you mean when you say risk signals and how that dovetails with going passwordless.
Yeah. So in that spectrum of that journey to passwordless, right? On one end of that journey, we can start by doing things like single sign-on and MFA, right? And we can reduce the number of times somebody has to actually put in their username and password, right? So that's one element of that is passwordless, right? So that's kind of one end. That's kind of where we can start the journey. On the other hand, we actually have the ability today to actually eliminate the password. So there really is no password, or maybe there is one, but the end user doesn't actually know that it exists because they're doing some kind of biometric authentication. In between those sort of two ends, or along that journey, one of the ways that we can solve for passwordless. And by the way, when I talk about passwordless, and I should have stated this, it's any method of verifying the identity of a user that does not require you to provide a password, right? And that means, what we think of as a password, a set of characters, right? So again, passwordless, any method of verifying the identity of a user that does not require you to provide a password. And then the goals of it, use fewer passwords, right? And we can do that with SSO and MFA, and get rid of passwords completely, which is one of the things that we talked about with how FIDO, which has become the de facto standard for passwordless. Lean into FIDO, we can actually get rid of passwords completely. So either one exists, the user doesn't know, or it does not exist at all. So on that journey, we can leverage risk signals as a means of providing a passwordless experience where we are not entering the password, right? We're not entering a username and password, and we're not being bombarded with MFA prompts. In that zero trust world where you SSO everything and MFA everywhere, one of the natural things that happens is you get MFA fatigue. And one of the ways to reduce that and also have a passwordless sort of experience is to use risk signals. And those risk signals deal with the identity, the context of that session. So the device, the identity, and a whole host of other details. There's a lot of machine learning and artificial intelligence that's being processed as part of that session that can tell if something's changed. So from the moment you logged in to maybe you go to open a new app, is there something that's different? If there's not, then I don't need to introduce any friction. I don't need to add a speed bump or a stop sign. I can just pass you through to that new app, leveraging risk signals. And the risk signals can come from one source. Certainly Ping has a product, but you may want to consume risk signals and aggregate them from multiple sources and use those to make better decisions. So it's all about the context. And again, that is a version of passwordless that could help you fulfill that passwordless journey to that point about, hey, not being able to rip the Band-Aid off and across the enterprise, which it's rare. It's incredibly rare that any organization is able to just rip the Band-Aid off and go passwordless, especially if they're, older than the last, if they were started, more than 10 years ago. Chances are very, very slim that you'd be able to do that. So another option, and this is all about options, and risk signals provide a really strong option to provide passwordless experience to your users.
So could we go through
security people? We're pretty familiar with the idea of, we're collecting all this traffic, we're collecting all these details and all this data about what's going on in the back end. But when you talk about risk signals, is there any hesitation from end users if they know what's going on when an organization is rolling this out? Because I think, some of the creepy factor sets in for consumers at times. We're getting better, with consumerism and mobile phones now using biometrics. It's a little less than it was, say, 5, 10, 15 years ago. But is there that perception still, meaning the business might give a little bit of pushback to security when they say, no, we're going to go passwordless and it's going to do it seamlessly in the back end. Users never going to know. We're just going to collect all this data.
Katie, that is a fantastic point, and it brings me back to something that I want everybody to leave this conversation with. And certainly depending on whether you're going passwordless for workforce and then passwordless for consumer, right? They're separate but related use cases, and you're gonna chances are you're going to deploy different capabilities and have different options on both of those sort of user types. But one of the important things that one of my customers ran into as they were preparing to go passwordless for their workforce, and they're focused around sort of the single sign-on portal, some VPN use cases, is that they needed to involve their regulatory stakeholders. So they needed to bring in internal audit because, again, people don't really understand passwordless, and we assume because it's been talked about for so long, we sometimes assume that people understand what it is, and regulators may not clearly understand what passwordless is. And so having your internal audit teams or any risk and control groups and any external regulators as stakeholders and explaining to them what you're doing, how you're doing it, how it's a better experience while also adding security, I think is a sort of a key point that people should not forget, because again, we're making an assumption that somebody understands what passwordless is and how it's going to work. Now, to the privacy angle, that is something else you're certainly going to run into, particularly in the EU. Also, why FIDO has become the de facto standard. There are ways that FIDO can protect biometric data because you're not actually sending that biometric data across the wire when you sort of set up a FIDO passwordless authentication flow. So there are ways that we are trying to maintain privacy. Again, a conversation that needs to be had so people are clear about that. And then along with that data that may be collected, certainly from a corporate sense, there could be things in place because there's an acceptable use agreement or other corporate sort of agreements that you sign that again, you're using corporate owned devices. And so, yes, there are some privacy elements there, but you also give away maybe some of those rights with that data being collected. Certainly that's not the case on the consumer side. And where I found in my privacy background where people get in trouble is when you fail to you say you're doing one thing, but you're doing something else, and being clear about what you're collecting, how you're collecting, and the use of it. Obviously, sort of global privacy laws, they all need to be looked at. But I think there is an element there, Katie, that I think, needs to be acknowledged, needs to be explored. A lot of this data, metadata, certainly some of it behavioral, and collecting it and securing it is certainly part of the journey to using those risk signals. But it's a fair point, and it's certainly one that's come up that we just need to address on a case by case basis, and really, each scenario. I'll say.
Right, lots of training and education.
Absolutely, the organizational change management, we often underestimate that, right? And so on the workforce side, I would call that changing human behavior, that organizational change management component. We like, again, one of my customers, and they've nailed the technological piece, and they're very focused on a couple of use cases because they know they can solve it, right? But what the long tail of it is having some of these conversations with their regulators, and sort of the training and education piece. The technology is ready to go, right? These are use cases that can be solved today. And, you just got to make sure that you don't forget the change management piece. And then on the consumer side, it's the same thing. There's a lot of messaging and communication that needs to occur before you roll these things out. And like I said, making sure that you have options so you can span that 8 to 80 gap.
From a cost standpoint for an organization, are we able to make the argument now that the return on investment and the cost benefit is at a point where it is equal to passwords and or the risk in which is associated with passwords?
Oh, 100%. I would, I think about reducing help desk calls, because nobody has to call the help desk, right, to reset a password. And I think, the average, I forget the numbers, let's just say the average help desk call is, $60 or what have you. Could be less, could be more. But you span that over, I've got customers that still have thousands, tens of thousands of help desk calls just related to password resets. So certainly from that perspective, I think, yes, you're saving money there. Mitigating phishing, and this is one of the strengths of FIDO, is because there isn't any server side credentials, you can't sort of fish and sit sort of man in the middle. And so mitigating that, so saving on ultimately breach costs. And we all know breach investigations are not cheap. You're parachuting in specialized resources on a moment's notice to investigate a potential incident or breach. Increased productivity. Those are all sort of on the workforce side. I think we've done some rough math in one of our. There's a survey that talks about the 5.2 million annually, or 5.2 million in productivity costs lost annually in the average organization because of passwords and because of the need to maintain credentials. And so certainly on the workforce side, I think on the customer side, how many of us have gotten really frustrated at, we're ready to buy something and it's asking you to create an account, or maybe asking you to log in, right? And you've forgotten the password, and you don't have it in your keeper account or in that password manager, and you've got to go through that whole reset thing. That's very frustrating, and that can cause churn for a business. So you might move on to someplace else. If you can find the same thing without that friction, you're going to move on. So that's a key thing, and being able to reduce the replay risk on the consumer side as well. We know what it takes, a hacker to brute force a password. So creating this, this long, multiple character, complex password. And by the way, I would offer that there's no such thing as a complex or strong password, in a sense that if you get phished, it doesn't matter, right? If you get phished, somebody's got a keylogger, it doesn't matter how long or complex your password is. So I can make that argument. So there's really, really benefits and value on both sides. And I think the juice is worth the squeeze from a passwordless perspective, if I can use that kind of terminology. I think it is at this point. There's more in favor of, and again, I'll caveat it by saying you're not going to be able to solve every use case right off the bat, but I think you can begin to tackle those use cases that do work, those user scenarios where you have integration capabilities. By the way, this customer that I'm talking about, they have Ping. They've been a Ping customer for a while, so this is capability that is within the product. So it's literally going on and turning on, flipping some switches, kind of so to speak, doing all the education piece, bringing on all the stakeholders. But yeah, some of you maybe have this capability today, and it's worth the investment. I think you'll get the ROI back just again in some of the value statements that I've shared.
Yeah, and it's a really good point about cred stuffing. That the copy paste function doesn't really care how many characters long your password is or how complex it is.
It does not. Some of this, by the way, and a colleague of mine who is in the passwordless business, he made the point to go back to that whole junk food thing. Some of this is like getting your kids, if you have kids, to eat their veggies, right? This is just like getting people to come to the table, getting them to eat their veggies, right? We know it's more healthy for you. We know there's long-term benefits. And if I can kind of boil that down, a lot of the things that we've been talking about in terms of the journey to passwordless, yes, you might be able to leapfrog some of these other things and move right to a true, quote unquote, true passwordless use case or journey. And by the way, this is about the user experience. And I hope I want to make that clear. This is product and technology, but ultimately it is about a user experience that you're trying to build. But yeah, so let's, figure out a way to get people to sort of eat their veggies, whether it's workforce and or consumer, and about taking those, small steps along the journey to passwordless and using whatever tools are at your disposal: SSO, MFA, risk signals. Even your MFA tool can provide a passwordless experience where you type in a credential, you get prompted for MFA on your phone, a push or face scan or like a face ID or touch ID or whatever it is, right? That's passwordless. That counts. So doing those things, kind of understanding your existing capabilities, leveraging them, and moving along the journey and maturing, driving the adoption that you need. I think those are all kind of key steps and things that can help you along your passwordless journey.
Sometimes you just have to salt those veggies and hide them until they eat them. Or sometimes you just disguise them.
Were you the kid that when the veggies came, you kind of waited till mom or dad turned around and then you kind of fed them to the dog? Is that what I'm? Is that what I'm? I am.
I like my veggies, man.
Oh yeah. Listen, I'm all about. I'm all about veggies. Yes, you got to eat your junk food too, but I'd rather take a healthy snack and veggies over junk food any day of the week. But yeah, some of this is literally like getting folks to eat their veggies. I think it's getting easier and easier though. I think people are more open to it. I'll call out a survey that Ping and one of our partners, Yubico, recently did. If you Google Ping Yubico 2022 survey, and I forget all the details, but one of the key findings was people are ready to go passwordless, right? IT, security leaders, et cetera, they're ready to go passwordless. There's just a little bit of trepidation, and I think Katie called out some of that. So there's a little bit of trepidation about how I go passwordless, and we again have laid out a journey that helps you get some of those wins on that spectrum that I talked about, or on that roadmap to passwordless. So there's a lot of things that I think you can do to kind of put one foot in front of the other as you're, ascending that passwordless mountain. So that's a good survey. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend checking it out. There's some really good data points in there relative to passwordless.
What was the survey again?
Yeah, give me 1 second here.
The Yubico one, right?
Yeah, it's a Ping and Yubico survey. And
yeah, there was a bunch of interesting.
Yubico is a passwordless partner, so they provide those little security keys. And again, that it's from June 14th of 2022. Ping Identity and Yubico survey finds IT leaders eager to move to passwordless. So leaders and decision makers. I think we looked at some organizations of 10,000 or more employees across the US, Europe, and maybe even Asia Pacific. So just those of you that are listening, just Google Ping Identity and Yubico survey. It's from June. The announcement is from June 14th of 2022, and I think you can get it from both our websites.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
I think even the FIDO2 Alliance referenced that recently for some of the stuff we were looking at. There's been a ton of effort around the passwordless stuff for this year, more so than I think I've seen over the last, call it 5 years. It's not a new thing by any means, but the fact that we're getting this as kind of a mainstream adoption, at least the concept, that puts it on the boardroom, that puts it in the executives' hands, so that they do have to kind of get this on their roadmap and start to consider when and where that makes the move and how they get there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I love that point. Right, so I think the kill the password thing has been around as long as probably Zero Trust, right? Zero Trust came out in 2010. I think we started. Well, I made the point about Bill Gates' statement and I forget which event he was at, but that was from 2004. So 18 years he talked about killing the password. This survey it talks about the key findings are relative to the security concerns that we all know about, and that the fact that they don't scale, right? They're too weak for cloud and API and IoT and all the things that we're dealing with today. The drain on productivity, but it then also spins it around and says, hey, listen, IT and other security leaders are excited about passwordless. They love the promise of it and solving some of these problems, but they acknowledge that there's some challenges and resistance to adoption, which is the key word there is adoption. Cultural aspect, the sort of political things, and it really becomes a IT and security leader problem. It's not a user problem, right? Per se, it really has to do with, folks figuring out how they're going to drive adoption, how they're going to roll this out, and how they're going to make sure they have options that everyone can partake in and use. But we're again, and the last point the survey talks about is unlocking the benefits of that passwordless future. So again, just recommend that you check it out if you need some data points, as you're defining your passwordless roadmap, telling that story to your ELT or your board, and defining the outcomes. I think there's probably some good content there that people can use to help tell that story.
Awesome. Yeah, so we found the survey, and we're going to slap it in the show notes, and awesome. I posted it on the Discord as well, so everybody's going to have a link to that. Awesome stuff. Aubrey, thank you so much for joining us today on Enterprise Security Weekly. My
pleasure. You know what I want right now?
some chips.
Some chips.
Salt and vinegars.
Salt and vinegar. By the way, one other sort of guilty snack that I found that I love, for those of you who have Costco, you may be able to find them on Amazon, but there are these chocolate covered they're chocolate coconut covered almonds, and they make a fantastic mid-afternoon snack. So I get them at Costco. I think they're seasonal. I think they're back in season. They're fantastic chaser to those salt and vinegar chips. So just saying,
like I'll leave you with that. Almond Joy.
That's exactly what they're kind of like, but I think they're even better. It's like it's like an Almond Joy on crack, basically, I think is how I would describe it. They are awesome. They're fantastic. So really another good cheat snack if that's your thing. It's been a pleasure, guys. Thanks for having Ping on. I really appreciate it. Great conversation. Hopefully this spurs some interest among listeners. And again, I always encourage feedback. Don't hesitate to contact myself or somebody from Ping. We love to help you out.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you again, Aubrey. Make sure you visit securityweekly.com/ping to learn more. Also, stay tuned. When we come back, we are going to talk tractor telematics. And after that, we'll go to the news.